strength and conditioning, all those good things. So we've talked to a lot of coaches, both in the NCAA and the NAIA junior college in wrestling and cross country and track. And we sprinkle in some people within the strength and conditioning community, CrossFit, and people like yourself that are just doing cool stuff, have good followings, and yeah, it's our version of our master class that we get to talk to cool people, pick their brains, and also present conversations that we wish we could have with our 18-year-old selves. So
Awesome, man.
that's what we got going on here. We live, Jim? I didn't see your
We are
thumbs up.
live, sir.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I have the windows different,
Oh,
but
my
all
bad.
right. All right, y'all. We are back. We're going live tonight again. Thank you for joining the Prince and I for another episode of Airey Bros Radio. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you rate and review. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you think. You love us, you hate us, you think we suck. We want to hear all about it. And as always, this and every episode is brought to you by Black Sheep Endurance. So if you got any questions about training for ultra marathons, marathons, we're dabbling a little bit with high rocks. So head on over there and see what it's all about. I'm happy to answer any questions you got for me over there. We're going back on the mat again a little bit tonight, belly to belly. We got some strength and conditioning stuff as well. But we are joined by fellow former New Jersey and fellow New Jersey wrestler Nick Daza. Nick is a strength and conditioning coach. He's the founder of DA Elite Coaching, providing 90-day transformation programs for elite performance. He's a certified landmine coach, and he's also ATG coaching. He wrestled for South Brunswick High School and also for Muhlenberg College. Nick, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you joining us tonight. Thanks for joining Jimmy and I on Airey Bros Radio. How's everything going tonight?
It's going well, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to chat with you. But before we get too deep into everything, the floor is yours. So if you have any socials anywhere you want people to find you for the coaching and anything, either websites or on Instagram, or if you TikTok or do any of those things, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so it's Daza Elite, Dazaelite on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
Awesome. So Nick, most important question we're probably going to ask you all night when you're kind of in that interesting zone where you're from up in South Brunswick. So I'm not too sure on this answer, but is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
It's pork roll, brother.
All right,
It's
let's
definitely
go.
pork roll.
Awesome. We never know. You get up in that area, that kind of by the bridge and all that stuff, north or south, just there. Sometimes it's Taylor ham, sometimes it's pork roll, but glad to know you call it pork roll. I don't know if you saw, Jim. I don't know if you saw it either. That the Jersey Devils are now serving Taylor ham at the Devils games.
Really?
Yep, yep.
And they call it Taylor Ham, huh?
Taylor ham sandwiches. Yep.
I guess got to root for who they got the 70 who I don't even follow hockey, so I couldn't even tell. Who's the Philly team?
The Flyers.
Flyers, got to go Flyers, or is it the Rangers? I know all
We
the
got
cool
you got
kids
the
like the
Rangers, and you
Rangers.
also have the Islanders.
Islanders, all right. All right.
But now we're way out of it talking hockey.
Yeah, what'd you do to me? So, Nick, a little bit of a through line for our listeners so they kind of know how you came up on our radar. You and I actually met at Rhino Wrestling. I think it was 2014, I think. Yeah, I think it was summer 2014. Mike Mal was doing a 24-hour lock-in, or as I like to call it, a rites of passage. It was like a rites of passage for young men, 24 hours of just exercises every hour on the hour. I thought it was amazing. It kind of lit that spark back up in me, got me. I went out west, started doing jujitsu, all that stuff again. So that's how we met, and I've been following you ever since. I followed you when you were wrestling in college, saw that whole journey, and also just I don't know. I don't go on my Prince James a lot, but I just for some reason you came up on Airey Bros and I started going through your videos. I was like, My man is crushing it. Not only does he know a thing or two about strength and conditioning and athletic performance, his videos are crushing it. So I want to talk to you about some content creation and stuff like that. But before we get into that, what do you remember about that 24-hour lock-in? Did that have a big impact on you?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I think everybody should do at least once in their life, just having that experience. Because, yeah, I mean, 3 a.m. live matches when you're like half awake, like that, it just does something to you, it builds you into a better version of yourself for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Rich is an ultra runner, so he's all about that. I'm not gonna say he might have gave Mike the idea for the 24-hour lock-in, but he might have gave Mike the idea for the 24-hour lock-in.
Were you in high
There
school
you
when you
go.
did that, Nick?
Yeah, I think I was going into like my junior year of high school.
Okay, respect, respect.
Yeah,
So
it was a great
another,
experience.
yeah, it was absolutely great experience. I put it off for like 3-4 years. I was like, I don't know. I'd rather just run for 24 hours, but then I don't know why I decided to do it. But another through line, not through line, but icebreaker. One of our topics. We've been getting some clickbait on it for our clips and on our YouTube. But you are a Division 3 wrestler. You also coach at Division 3, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I coached at W&J College the last 2 years.
Are you still there?
Nah, right now I'm full time with my strength and conditioning. I'm actually gonna be I have a gym here in Jersey with my buddy. It's called The Key. We're up in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. So any North Jersey wrestlers definitely feel free to come through.
All right, all right. So got the key to look forward to. Got another place to visit, Rich, when we are back
No
visiting.
doubt.
But so the question of the night that we're gonna clip up and make the clickbait and get all the people mad, being a Division 3 wrestler, someone who coached at Division 3, with the exception of Division 1, because we kind of know that there's a lot of studs Division 1, but Division 3, Division 2, NAIA, JUCO, what's the toughest division in your opinion?
I mean, I'm biased. I'm gonna say D3. It's the biggest division. You have the most competition by far.
Yeah, that was the we had Matt Oliver on. He's the head wrestling coach at Huntington College in Alabama, and his response to that sparked a lot of controversy on Instagram. There's a lot of people, a lot of Division 2, a lot of NAIA, and some JUCO wrestlers that were offended that. And again, it's just the way you clip it up. But yeah, that was his sentiment was that it's the hardest because there's the most schools, it's the most saturated, and the qualifying system is very limiting. You only take at the time. I think it was top three. I think they're expanding a little bit, but the most amount of schools, the least amount of qualifiers. It's very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It is not hard to it's very hard to make it out, especially like now they just updated it. They made a couple more regions, but even then they're still just taking top three.
Yeah.
Nick, in doing some research and was reading your bio on your website, it kind of refreshed me and made me remember that you got hurt a bunch in college. And I saw that, you took to the PT, you took to doing all those little exercises to kind of get yourself back on the mat. What kind of made you want to be a mindset coach and a strength and conditioning coach?
Yeah, man. So if it wasn't for the experiences I went through in college with the injuries and just all the different adversity that I faced, I don't think I'd be in this position. And at the time, it felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. I remember the day I found out that this was my junior year, found out I was wrestling on a torn MCL, torn meniscus, and the doctor basically told me like, "Hey, you either need to get surgery or you're not going to be able to wrestle again." And I was just absolutely heartbroken. And at the time, it seemed like the worst thing ever. But if it wasn't for that and all the other injuries I dealt with, I wouldn't have went down this path of learning about, rehab, strength and performance, and, now helping other people with that because it just became something very near and dear to my heart. Like having experienced it firsthand, I genuinely want to help as many people as I possibly can in the same situation.
So having that sage wisdom of injuries and kind of learning yourself through, I had Rich. Rich is 11 years older than me. He was trying to give me the cheat codes, but I wasn't listening. So how do you try to instill those codes in your clients, but know that they're gonna kind of do the trial and error on their own.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try to do the best I can to pull on just like my personal experience and tell them like, hey, listen, I was in your exact situation. I did the PT route. I did the ice. I did all these different things. In my experience, like this is what works. If you want to try it, by all means, like, hey, go for it. This is what I think the best option would be for you. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's up to them to make that decision for themselves.
Nick, was this something while you were at Muhlenberg? Were you studying like exercise science or anything like that that kind of led you down this road? Or was it mostly just your own personal experience and your injuries and fixing those sorts of things that led you to this journey after college?
Well, I was always interested in exercise science. Unfortunately, Muhlenberg didn't have like a straight up exercise science program. But for me, when I was at Muhlenberg, I was studying political science and I was thinking of going to law school afterwards. And I think for me, the injuries just kind of came at a pivotal crossroads in life where I was like, hey, this is something that actually interests me. And I started just spending basically all of my waking hours when I wasn't in college taking classes, learning about rehab, exercise science, just on my own. And then after I graduated, got my certs and stuff and started training athletes from there.
What were some of those first certifications that led you, because I think for Jimmy and Jimmy got into it a little bit before I did some stuff with Zach, but I think for me, just in terms of the most bang for your buck, in terms of learning the most about movement and strength and conditioning, that led me to the CrossFit Level 1 seminar to teach people how to weightlift a little bit better and learn the Olympic lift. So where did that journey start for you?
So for me, it started with ATG, and the reason why was because my knees were the most like recurring issue for me. So first it was LCL, then the other LCL, then my MCL, my meniscus, and then I had little tweaks here and there. And so I remember I was on Instagram and I saw knees over toes guy, and I just went down the rabbit hole of his content, and I was like, okay, let me try some of this stuff. And the way I am, I try something first to see if it actually works for me before I make a decision. So I started doing his workouts, started to see some good results, especially with, like an ATG split squat because it's so direct to wrestling where it's literally a penetration step. If you can't get your knee over your toe, you're going to have a lot of trouble when you're shooting. And yeah, so that was the first certification. From there, Landmine and WEC method were the two other ones that really just opened my mind to the scope of movement and just how rotational we are as human beings.
Is that the Landmine University stuff? Yeah.
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 So, Landmine University comes from Alex Canellis. He was actually an undefeated wrestler in the state of Iowa, and he learned the rotational movement from David Weck. So I actually went to Texas, got certified by David Weck, and then I did my Landmine cert as well.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, so I want to dive straight in the deep end with some of the stuff you just said. ATG, is that the guy who does the knees over toe? Is that his certification? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because I've got bad knees and I've always been intrigued by his stuff, but I always thought when I went and I looked at his stuff that I need other equipment. Can you do that stuff without a treadmill, without having the blocks and stuff, or do you need to kind of have the buy-in first to be able to utilize that program?
Nah, dude, I think you can start with literally body weight. There's a lot of things that you can do with just body weight, but what I always recommend, especially for something like the backward sled, I didn't have access to a sled basically the whole time I was in college. So the best option I recommend there is the banded knee extension. You can loop a band behind each of your knees and then you just extend one at a time, almost like you're doing a backward sled drag. And you get that same level of blood flow directly to the knees. Get your knees feeling a lot better right away.
And you mentioned a split squat of how that's like that penetration step. I was Rich mentioned CrossFit. When we went to our CrossFit seminar, I was in the center the whole weekend because I moved like garbage. I was just a broken wrestler who did not move well, who half
Stubborn too.
squatted. Huh?
He was stubborn too.
I was stubborn and I would just wanted to go hard, right? I didn't really
Yeah.
care about technique or form. I was still young. I was in my early 20s at the time. And my my point being is just like I couldn't squat. And then I met someone who got me on split squats, and that was kind of the light bulb moment for me. Do you think that's like the starting place and that wrestlers should probably do more single leg stuff than doing the double leg stuff?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not saying the double leg stuff is bad, but if you're so imbalanced, because think about it, as a wrestler, I was a right leg lead basically my whole career. And obviously you develop more, strength to one leg than the other. So balancing out both sides, doing a lot of single leg exercises is going to help to even out some of those imbalances. Because if you're super imbalanced and you just go and you continue wrestling, like it's just going to further that, right? And then you go and you do your bilateral lifts and like, yeah, you're going to get benefits from it, no doubt, but you're still super imbalanced. Whereas if you go single leg first, try to even out both sides a little bit more, and then work into your heavy bilaterals, you're going to feel better.
That's interesting. Just I just had a light bulb moment listening to talk about that stuff. It's like how many young kids that have had knee issues and things like that are just from an overuse repetitive of being dominant on a right side or a left side and not, same thing with like a pitcher or a javelin thrower that's only using the one side of their body and then man, I think we just turned the wrestling world on its head right now that I don't know how many people are actually thinking like that, that's what could potentially like think of some of those kids like, oh man, he would have been so good if he was just so injury prone. It's like maybe it's just from that repetition of going to that one dominant side over and over and over and not fixing the imbalances.
Yeah, man, 100%. I was that guy,
Yeah.
so like this is something that I spent so many hours just like, all right, why? Like, and once I hurt my right knee and I tore my MCL, I became a lefty because I had no other option. Like I wasn't gonna shoot sweep singles to that side anymore. I just couldn't.
So you
Nick,
have, oh, go ahead, Jim.
talking about those imbalances, and this was a conversation. I don't remember who we were talking to, Rich, but they were talking about how a lot of soccer players are they're way more injury prone now. Do you see that? Are you just working with wrestlers, or are you seeing that where if you can get like a soccer player or a younger athlete working on both sides and doing that, that's going to help them?
Absolutely. So we work with all athletes here at the Key. My boy Justin Mucci, he works with football players. We also have my friend Aiden, who works with a lot of basketball guys. I personally have worked with Division 1 track athletes, baseball players, wrestlers, pro MMA fighters. So the biggest thing I've noticed is like, yeah, regardless of what sport you do, you're a human being first, right? So if you're an imbalanced human being, think about it like you're driving one car with a flat tire and the rest are perfectly fine. You keep driving that car, eventually it's not going to be able to drive, right? It's the same thing as you as a human being playing your sport over and over and over again on that same imbalance. Eventually, it's going to lead to a problem. And it might be further on down the line, but like you're going to run into that over time. But if you address that first and then play your sport, you're not just going to have less likelihood of injury. You're just going to feel better overall.
Jim, I think it was Dan John.
All right.
I could be wrong, but
Oh, was it Zach?
we might have talked about it with Zach too.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of it's because of um everyone is they're playing more than they're practicing. And that's just repetitive. That's where a lot of those knee injuries are coming from in soccer is because you know, kids go to a soccer tournament and they're playing 4, 8 games in a weekend at, 6, 8, 12 years old, and they're not doing the things they need to be doing strength and conditioning wise to keep themselves in balance. And that's where all the injuries are coming from.
Nick, so you mentioned being at the Key, but like I said when we first hopped on, you're crushing it online as far as your content. Like crushing it. Like I want to pick your brain about some of the content you're doing. So how are you managing, coaching people in person and doing the online stuff, and which one do you prefer?
It's a great question. I like the online stuff. I've always been a naturally creative person. I love to draw when I was a kid. So like the whole content element is just something that I enjoy doing a lot. Like I enjoy the clips, the editing, everything that goes along with that. But yeah, there's nothing that compares to coaching guys here in person. Just like the energy that we get is second to none. So yeah, it's hard to choose, man. The thing I like about online is that I can impact more people because I can only coach so many people in a day. But with online, like I signed a guy on earlier today who's in London. If it wasn't for online, I would have never met him or been able to help him. But now through the internet and technology, I'm able to make an impact in his life. So yeah, I enjoy both, but online is definitely something that is a blessing because I can make more of an impact on more people.
What does that online process look like for you? Because I know with what I do with online coaching, I'm creating programs and the athletes are applying them. Are you doing something similar to that? Are you doing like one-on-ones too, where you might be like doing a Zoom call and they're doing the workout and you're putting them through it? How are you running all that?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of that.
Hmm.
So I don't really do like a full-on Zoom call where I coach them through the workout, but what I do is I assess their imbalances because a lot of people I work with have some type of injury right now that they want to deal with. And then they'll basically do the program that I make for them, customized to their imbalances. They'll send me videos back of their form, and then I do video form reviews. So I'll use Loom. You'll see my face on the camera while they're going through the exercises, and I'll kind of use the mouse and point out, key details to help them get the best results from the exercises.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations for someone dealing with Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Number one, isometrics with the heel elevated, right?
Hmm.
So changing the angle of the heel. One thing that I actually dealt with was Achilles tendonitis for years after, because I had sprained my right ankle. That was like the first injury I ever had back in high school. Never thought much about it. Re-sprained it in college, and then the Achilles would just always flare up. So I saw a lot of results from changing the angle of the ankle and the heel specifically when doing isometrics. So think about like a lunge iso going heel elevated and then also putting the front of the foot on a 45-pound plate and letting that heel hang off so the back of the foot has to stabilize that Achilles.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't been doing that. I've been doing a lot of heel raises off of like a 45-pound plate or two 45-pound plates, but I will definitely add those ISOs in there. Seems like it was getting better, and then I might have ran a little bit more than I should have yesterday, and I'm feeling every bit of 48 right now today.
I hear you there, man. I actually ran like 4 miles before this podcast with one of my track athletes who's here visiting, and I couldn't tell you the last time I ran, so I'll be feeling it tomorrow for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for sure.
Nick, so being a student of the game, always getting better as a coach, but like I said, your content is on point. I notice you do all the tricks when you're making your content. So how do you kind of devote your time to becoming a better coach, but also stay up on all the trends on social media? And how much time are you putting in each week as far as recording?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you on the content. I appreciate that, man. I put a lot of time into this, and people like recently have been telling me like, "Oh, dude, this happened so fast. You like blew up." And it's like, "No, man. I've been making content for going on 5 years at this point, and it didn't do anything until probably the last 6 months, So it's definitely a learning process. I think the more content you make, it's like any other skill. You get better at it. So one of the pieces of advice that I give to anybody that's looking to get into the content game is literally just start posting right now. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care if you think it's the worst piece of content ever. Put it out there and then just keep going because eventually you're going to get better. It's going to start to click for you. And then you're going to be able to do an edit that would have taken you an hour would take you maybe 20 minutes. Like right now, the fastest I've done content when I was in Europe a couple weeks ago, I did 14 reels in 40 minutes. Just film them all back to back to back. And then the editing on average probably takes about 20 to 30 minutes depending on the reel, sometimes a little bit less. Um, And then yeah, I always schedule out time in my day to just focus on studying, like more training. I love learning about this stuff, man. I'm an absolute nerd when it comes to learning about training and the body and just the way that different exercises affect people. So yeah, I have time blocked out every day that I just spend and just kind of geek out on the internet, learning about different training methodologies.
Do you have a favorite thing you're diving into currently at the moment?
Yeah, man. So I've been on the spinal engine theory for a while now because that's kind of what got my interest peaked in the landmine system. But it's essentially the idea of like when I was in college, what our lifting coach always told us was keep a neutral spine, right? And for a lot of lifts, like that definitely is important. But what I found in my experience was like, all right, I was doing all this neutral spine training and I became kind of stiff and rigid because I wasn't doing anything with my back bent or laterally flexed. So when I started incorporating more of the coiled, like side bend movements with my neutral spine, like my deadlifts, my cleans, my snatches, I saw so much of a carryover into wrestling because if you think about hand fighting, snapping, pulling somebody down, like your spine is going to bend, it's going to rotate. So, yeah, that's kind of the rabbit hole that I'm going down right now.
You said it's a spinal engine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
idea is like it's spinal rotation that
Yep.
actually propels our movement forward.
Okay. Is there any one specific person or coach that you're cued in on with that's really their niche?
Yeah, so that's all David Weck, but the guy that
Okay.
originally came up with the spinal engine theory, his name is Sergey Gravitovsky. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But yeah, it came from him, and then Weck kind of popularized it, and Alex Kanellis kind of adopted some elements of that into the landmine course as well.
Okay. I'm familiar with David. I've dug into his stuff a little bit just from the running perspective, so I will dive back into that. I'm curious, you said, you've been at it for 5 years with the content creation, but it's really been, say, like the last 6 months or so. Was there any one particular thing that popped for you at in that point?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I had this one reel. Uh, so basically, when I was coaching at W&J, I did something stupid. I had like not, I hadn't warmed up at all. My guys were wrestling live. I had been sitting down all day, and I had the bright idea of thinking I was like 18 again and just going in and wrestling live with no warm up whatsoever. Got into a weird position, and I tweaked my knee a little bit, and I was like, oh man, like I just got injured. I've been healthy for 7 years, like, and I started freaking out. And so I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna use this as content. Like I'm gonna see how fast I can recover from this MCL tweak and get back to shooting and wrestling and going live. And I got back to shooting within 2 weeks, pain free. Got back to wrestling live within 4 weeks, drilling within three. So yeah, one of the things that I thought was gonna be a huge setback actually turned up into one of the best pieces of content that I've had to date.
Okay. Is that a lot of knees over toes stuff that you were showing?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, that was kind of the protocol. Knees over toes mixed with the isometrics, man. I'm a huge believer in the isometrics just because, yeah, there's little to no muscle damage. You feel so much better. It just keeps the tendons healthy.
Nick, I am
Gotcha.
curious, knowing what you know now, do you think you needed to get surgery?
Nah, no, not at all. Like, I've I've helped guys. One of my athletes last year had a torn hip labrum. Within 6 months, he was back to wrestling. And it was one of those things where he would have to give up certain takedowns. Like if somebody got a single leg, shelved it, and elevated that and put pressure on his hip, he would have to just bail out because the pressure was so bad. Within 6 months, he was wrestling again, no problem. Within a year, he was hitting lifetime PRs in deadlift and never got surgery on his hip. I mean, I definitely think there are situations where you do need to get surgery, but even in that scenario, I think there's better ways to rehab the injuries afterwards. And one of the conversations I have with people on a regular basis is like, hey, PT is great. For a lot of people, it'll get them to the point where they can do basic things without, pain, like walking or lifting their arm over their head. But there's a big difference between me being able to lift my arm over my head and then having somebody who also weighs 185 pounds sprawl on my shoulder and put all of their body weight on that joint. And so that's kind of where I come in and I help them condition the shoulder to be able to handle those high forces.
All right. And I know it varies from client to client, but you're big on the landmine stuff. You're big on the knees over toe stuff. And we were talking about split squats. Is there room for conventional stuff? Is that in the programs? You mentioned deadlifts with one of your athletes. How do you kind of mix everything in?
Yeah, dude, that's the fun part. So like I've been playing around with different ways of programming it, but the way I found is like, all right, if it's someone who just dealt with an injury, we're gonna do a lot of knees over toes, just like short range stuff, lots of flossing to help break up the scar tissue around that injury. And then slowly over time, we're gonna work them into, say, like a longer range split squat, or if it's somebody with a shoulder injury, we'll work them back into pressing movements as long as they can do it without pain. And then once they're back at that point where they can tolerate at least practicing their sport, then it's like, okay, cool. Now we're going to get you into some of the freak stuff, like being able to do one arm chins, handstand push ups, some of the crazy stuff with the landmine. But yeah, conventional movements like I definitely still use, and I definitely want to clarify that because I sometimes will get people who think I don't do any conventional movements, which is not true. I still squat, I still bench, still deadlift myself. I've just found that by also incorporating a lot of these other methods in addition to the conventional movements, you become a more well-rounded athlete overall.
Are you keeping those maybe on separate days, or are you combining them on the same day? Maybe using some of the more um, unilateral versus bilateral stuff as maybe more warm up or cool down types of things?
Yeah, so typically how I'll do it is like we'll do, sled work, rope flow, juggling, that kind of thing as a warm up to get them loose and get them just having fun. And then we'll work up into a lot of the mobility stuff with ATG. Once they're mobile and they feel like they can get into those ranges comfortably, then we'll add in some of the conventional lifts like their squats, their bench, because they've built up the capacity and they've loosened up the joints to be able to handle that. And then we'll also add in some of the landmine stuff for explosive power.
Okay. You mentioned the rope flow. Talk to me about the rope flow. I've been seeing this pop up a little bit more. Kelly Starrett, I believe, just posted a clip about he was using an old climbing rope for the rope flow, but I've seen it a little bit more and more. Nick Suriano was using it a little bit with the guys out in California. Talk to us about rope flow and the
Dude,
benefits.
yeah, rope flow has been an absolute game changer for me. So the last like major injury that I had to kind of overcome before I felt like I was like finally good was I had back spasms all throughout college. The left side of my back would just lock up, and like when it locked up, I wouldn't be able to move. And I had it actually happen when I was at W&J. I was wrestling with one of my guys, went to hit a mat return, picked him up, and as soon as I bent to the side like that, my back just locked up and I literally dropped the kid in the air and I like dropped to the ground. And I worked with a buddy of mine. His name is Brian Mitchelson. Shout out to him. He got me into a lot of the rotational stuff and opened my eyes to like Weck method and landmine, but he used the rope a lot and I didn't have a rope at the time. So what I did was I had a resistance band in my wrestling room and I just kind of played around with skipping the resistance band, rotating it, going side to side. And what I found is just that gentle spinal rotation is something that so many people are missing. For me at the time, I was sitting all day because I was an assistant coach at college and I also worked 9 to 5. I had a sales job. So the majority of my day, I was sitting with my spine stiff at a computer, right? If you think about it from the standpoint of like knees over toes guy says, hey, let's reverse out knee pain by walking backwards to balance out going forward. This is the same concept, but it's like, hey, let's reverse out sitting with a neutral spine at all times by getting gentle rotation to it. And it's something that anybody can do at any level. You don't have to do the crazy tricks, but you can just start off super simple, one arm at a time, work on going side to side and just gently get that spine moving the way that it's supposed to.
Okay. All right. And you can just do that with bands. You don't have to necessarily get one of those fancy ropes to get started.
Yeah, man, that's what I did for probably like 3 months before I got a rope. And I definitely saw benefits from it because it's just the act of moving and rotating the hips and the shoulders in opposite directions.
Okay. Does David talk about that stuff too?
Yeah, yeah. David
Yeah.
is big on the rope. I got my first rope when I was in Texas with him.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Nick, on your Instagram, it says strength, power, and mindset coach. Does everyone who works with you, are they doing mindset, or is that only for people who want it? How does that work? When we logged on, how you doing? Living the dream, brother. So I already know you're already in it with the words. How's it work with your clients?
Yeah, man, I try to instill that in everybody that I work with. So I'm big on mindfulness. It was something that when I was dealing with all the injuries in college, the only way I was able to get through it was understanding my mind better because otherwise, like, I probably would have had a mental breakdown, to be honest with you. So I got into meditation. I got into a lot of just studying the mind and how the mind works. And I try to incorporate those elements into everybody's program that I work with. So just elements of meditation. I'm also big into like Qigong and just gentle, mindful movement. I think is super powerful. And I think rope flow also is a form of mindfulness. In my experience, using rope flow has helped me become more aware of my body in all positions. And I'll tell you guys this because you're wrestlers, right? So you understand, like people say, like, oh, you can't teach mat awareness or you can't teach mat sense. Dude, I found since I've started doing rope flow, my mat awareness has gone up significantly. And I wish I would have known about it back when I was in college because I've shown some of my college wrestlers, like they love the ropes. And some of the things I've seen them do in just a couple months of playing around with the rope, it's just like you can tell, like they're just more aware of where their body is in all positions. So, yeah, to go back to your original question, I think mindfulness is something that's important that everyone should incorporate. And mindset is something that I try to work on with everybody that I work with because, from my perspective, if I only help you get your knees right, if I only help you heal your low back or heal your shoulder, but every other element of your life is messed up, I feel like I failed you as a coach. I feel like if you work with me, if you invest the time to be coached by me, you should also see improvements in other areas of your life to some extent.
Nick, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 26. I just turned 26 in July.
Dang.
Man, you are way beyond your years, sir.
Yeah.
Because when I was your age and I was coaching, I was not. Rich and I like to call it woo woo. I'm really big into Paul Check. He was someone who kind of got me into the mindfulness and be. I always had this division with myself as far as being spiritual and being an athlete. And Paul
Yeah.
Check was one of the first people that was kind of like, "Hey, dude, like you said, you're a human. That's part of the whole experience. You're both. You're not one or the other. You're both." So I think that's huge because I never had a way to teach that to my athletes and kind of talk to my athletes about it because it was always like separate. Like you don't talk about this stuff. You're always, you had to kind of skirt the line with God and stuff like that. So I just want to applaud you for being able to kind of help the youth with things like that and helping them be spiritual beings and also be athletes and combine them and use the two to help each other.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I also think that's big too for not, I know I've struggled with this, is you tying your identity to being an athlete or being a wrestler. And especially that hits hard when an injury pops up and you're like, oh, I can't do the thing that I identify with myself. And you have to kind of dig into a lot of other things. So I think giving athletes that and talking to them about those sorts of things, just like you're doing the injury prevention stuff for the physical stuff, you're also doing the mindset stuff for that preparation. God forbid if any, injury does come along, you have that you're not necessarily tying your identity to this one very specific thing. And as a wrestler, it's only, after college, maybe if you go into the Olympics, that's a very small percentage, or you go into MMA, which is also a small percentage. Then you're going into coaching, and I'm sure everyone on this call has seen some coaches that have gone into coaching for the wrong reasons about, wins and losses and not like helping individuals, them better, making them being better athletes, but better human beings as well too. So that's huge. And like Jimmy said, at 26 to know those sorts of things and be able to give those things to athletes. That's well beyond what we were doing at 26 in our coaching lives. So kudos to you.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like if it wasn't for all the injuries and just like the struggles, I don't think I would have had the perspective. And at the time, yeah, it was like the worst thing that could have happened to me because I definitely tied my identity to wrestling. Like if it wasn't for college, if it wasn't for wrestling, I probably wouldn't have pursued going to college. I just wanted to wrestle in college. Like that was literally it. I could have done the school part, like that was no problem, but like I wanted to go there to wrestle. I wanted to be an All-American and yeah, having that perspective of getting it taken away from me and then finding out who I really was without wrestling it just shaped me in a different way. And yeah, I try to give that back to everyone that I work with.
Well, with that being said, what sort of tips can you offer some wrestlers looking to make some in-season and off-season gains in your experience?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is like, all right, if you're in season, you have to be lifting at least once or twice a week, but you have to be lifting because if you think about it, you go through the grind of a college season, which is basically 6 months, and you don't lift and you're consistently cutting weight every week to make weight, to compete, and taking that toll on your body. You're not going to be as strong come March as you were in October. So lifting to just maintain that strength, and it doesn't have to be an hour-long lift. With a lot of my guys, what we did last season was we would do dense strength blocks, and it's kind of similar to CrossFit in the sense that I would have them do a set every minute. And then basically we would work up to like a heavy single or a heavy triple, and the lifts would probably be 30 minutes to an hour or to 45 minutes, an hour including the warm-ups, but we were in and out every day. And like it wasn't anything that was there to beat them up, but just to keep them healthy and keep them mobile. And we saw great results doing that. So, yeah, you don't have to be in the gym every single day during the season, but at the very least, you want to be getting 1 to 2 lifts in every single week to stay strong and stay healthy.
Other than the in-season lifting, are there maybe other areas or things in training wise that you think wrestlers are overlooking still?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in a perfect world, every wrestler would do rope flow because again, like just that element of body awareness. Like I saw myself when I met David Weck, he told me he was like, "Yeah, this dragon roll." He was like, "This is gonna get your switches better." And I'm gonna be honest, at the time I was like, I didn't really see it. I was like, "How?" And then like a couple months later, I was wrestling with one of my guys. He got in on my leg, turned it down, and he was about to take me down, and I just hit this switch like I don't even know how I did it. I just switched them and I was like, Weck was right. And I was just like freaking out on the inside. I was like, yo, this is crazy. So yeah, the rope is an absolute game changer. If you don't have a rope, hey, do it with a band, but just getting that body awareness is huge. I think two other areas that a lot of wrestlers underemphasize are one, mobility, and that's where I think split squats, Nordics, Jefferson curls, those exercises are huge to help just keep their bodies healthy because yeah, as wrestlers, we have this mindset of like go 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 hard every single day. That's what we do, right? But when it comes to just keeping your body healthy, it's like, dude, yeah, go hard, but like the goal isn't to break your body down. It's to get enough stimulus to keep you strong, but also stay loose because you're going to get into those extended positions, and when you do, it's better to be able to handle that. So mobility is definitely a key area that I think is underemphasized. And then lastly, explosiveness. And I think that's where the landmine really changes things up because combining the landmine with your Olympic lifts, yeah, you're going to develop some freak levels of athleticism.
Yeah, the landmine clean and jerk, that that's wild watching, especially when they're moving big weights like that. The power and explosion that must come into that is just unbelievable to transfer on the mat.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, one of my wrestlers from last year, my 97 pounder, even told me he was like, dude, my snaps like feel so much stronger, and it makes sense, because when you're wrestling, right, you don't want to reach with your lead hand. So when you set up for the landmine, you're going opposite hand, opposite foot. You're grabbing the bar with your backhand, and then every movement, you're switching your feet. which is kind of like when you hand fight, you don't want to keep that foot forward. You want to move your feet with the snaps. So, yeah, the power, but also just the coordination that it develops is huge.
You mentioned the Nordic curls, the Nordic hamstring curls. Do you have any favorite modifications or scalings to do those and or some good warm-ups? Because I've tried to do them a couple times and I feel like almost instant cramps like come on. So I'm just curious, what do you have in terms of getting people into those and easing into those?
Yeah, yeah. So the one that I like to start people off with, it's not a full Nordic. It's called the Nordic hinge. So you just bend, you keep your knees like straight up, and then you just bend at the waist and try to lean your head towards the ground. So it's literally just the hips that are going forward, but the knees are not getting locked out. And I found that that variation helped me work up to being able to do a full Nordic.
Are you doing that on a GHD machine?
Yeah, you can do
Yeah,
it on
yeah.
a GHD or on a Nordic bench. Depends on the equipment you have.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I found that like I think every leg rider should be able to do a full Nordic hamstring curl. Because I was a big leg rider, and that's how I started getting my knee injuries. And looking back on it, it's like, yeah, I didn't have the capacity to handle that torque that I was putting from hip to knee with the figure four. But like now that I can do a Nordic, my figure four is so much stronger than it was before because my hamstrings and my hips can actually handle that force.
Pull-ups and Nordic hamstring curls, Jim. We blew it in high school.
Well,
It's the
Nick,
way to go.
I think it's pretty awesome because I'd say probably 10, 15 years wrestling has been kind of coming out of the ice age as far as strength and conditioning. But as far as imbalances, I don't think that's we're there yet in the community. There's guys like Kyle Dake, the guy who he works with. He's really big on that Manny. But
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that there's someone like you out there that can help kids with these imbalances. Because sometimes when you're a kid, you think you're doing everything possible, and you're not. You know your vision's only
Not
that
even
clear.
close.
Yeah.
You're not, and then as you get older, you realize, oh, there was so much I could have added to my toolkit. So I think it's really important that there's someone like you out there that can help these kids and help them work on their imbalances. That's the difference between getting on the medal stand and not. So kudos to you, sir. One last thing I have for you, if Rich doesn't have anything before we get into the final four. You mentioned the landmine, you mentioned the rope flow, and you also mentioned knees over toes. If I have a DeLorean and I can go back to, junior year you, which one are you taking with you? Which one do you think's gonna help you get good over that hump? Maybe not get injured as much. What do you think's imperative?
I think the landmine for sure. Knees over toes would be a close second, but just the development of explosive power combined with the fact that all the landmine movements are done on the toes of the feet with the heels elevated, you get so much ankle stability from doing that. Yeah, I think that combination would have just made me an absolute freak when it comes to explosiveness.
Are you doing, obviously, there's tons of stuff you can do with the landmine, but are you mostly focusing on that clean and jerk? Is that the main?
So there's three main ones that I do. There's the clean and jerk, the snatch, and then I like to do this one. It's called the split screwdriver. So you start in this position, switch the feet as you rotate the landmine. And yeah, that one's real good. It's kind of like think about like steering wheel the head when you're hand fighting.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I could talk shop and talk training all night, but we definitely want to be respectful of your time. So I'm ready to get into the final four if you are, Jim.
I have one kind of non-training related since we're getting into the final four. You were born in Colombia, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do have another one.
When you first get to Colombia, when you go see the family, what are you eating first? What's your go-to?
Yeah, it's funny. You asked me this. I was just in Colombia, like right before this. So first thing I'm eating arepa de choclo.
What is that?
It's basically so it's like All right, it's
We
kind of
had them
like
at
this
Denver, the
corn.
arepas.
Oh, the empanadas?
No, the
No,
arepas,
arepas.
the it's like the sandwich one.
Oh,
Remember
all
the food
right.
truck at Denver East? It
Yeah,
had
yeah,
the
yeah.
plantains in it.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
that's arepa rellena. They'll cut it open and they'll like
Hmm.
stuff it with like meat, beans, plantains.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so good, man.
now, are you getting a family member to make that, or are you going to a place?
No, yeah, my grandmother makes it better than any place I could go to.
That's awesome. Where in Colombia?
So I was born in Bogota. My family
Okay.
is from there and Cartagena.
Cartagena. Okay. All right. So my question for you, Nick, you came to the United States when you were 3, correct?
Yeah,
I'm assuming for a very long time, Spanish was the dominant language that was spoken at your house.
yeah, 100%.
When you dream, do you dream in English or Spanish?
Bit of both.
Bit of
It's
both.
weird. Yeah, sometimes I'll have dreams in Spanish, and other times I'll have dreams in English. It just depends on the night.
And when you're now that you've been here for as long as you've been here, when you think, do you think in English?
Mostly, yes, because I've spent so many years here in the US. But it's interesting. After being in Colombia for the last like 2.5 weeks before I came back, I was thinking in Spanish. So it
Yeah,
just depends on the environment, I guess.
that's awesome. I find that stuff fascinating that like yeah, like when you're speaking multiple languages and stuff, what you dream in and then when that switch happens. I was just talking to a we have a math teacher at school and he's been here for 16 years. He's from Colombia and when he
Oh, nice.
came here, he didn't speak any English. He said he just recently, probably within the last, year or two, finally started thinking in English.
Yeah, it's
So
it's crazy how that works.
yeah, it's interesting. Fascinating how the mind works in general.
Coming from Colombia at 3, did you feel any kind of being left out or being different going through school, or did no, because you came so young?
Yeah, no, I still remember it. Like, I always felt that way. Because the thing is, too, like, I moved around a lot when I was little. So we first moved to Miami, and then we moved to Jersey. And then when I was in Jersey, I moved every single year until I was in like sixth grade. So, yeah, I always kind of had that feeling because not only was I an immigrant, I was also the new kid at school every single year. So I just kind of had to like start over all the time.
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough moving around like that and also because I'm fascinated. I just got a student who just came in from Venezuela, um, and she speaks very little English. She's trying to teach me things, and I'm always trying to learn, brush up on my Spanish. But I'm amazed that people that come from other countries, they just get thrown into a school system, and it's like I couldn't imagine being in a class where everyone's speaking a different language, and you're just kind of trying to like figure out
Yeah,
what's
it's
going on, or it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's funny because when I first came here, the one school I was in when I spoke no English, they just kind of like threw me in, and then I moved the year after that. But by that point, I had kind of already learned English, and they tried to put me in ESL, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. Like, I can speak English now."
And I'm amazed how quickly and how well people pick it up. And I'm just like, man, we're so lame here as Americans that we we just speak English and like how people can come to this country and very quickly, I guess you have to out of necessity. If maybe if we were plunked in Colombia or somewhere in South America or somewhere in Europe and we had to learn Spanish or French or Italian, we might pick it up pretty quickly for survival purposes. Interesting.
Nick, you seem to be very insightful, and you mentioned about your injuries teaching you knees over toe and kind of getting you to go down that way. So you don't seem to be like someone who takes that victim mentality. What kind of lessons did you learn or insight did you take from moving all those times and, coming here and always being the new guy?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I learned at an early age was yeah, there's a lot of things that happened in my life that were just out of my control. Like every year I was moving, couldn't really do anything about it. So I've always been big on, yeah, just focus on the things that are in your control. Like for me, at the time, all I could control was my performance in school. And then when I started wrestling, it was school and wrestling. But as an immigrant, my parents always wanted me to go to college. So I was like, all right, I have to perform in school and I have to perform in wrestling. And despite all the things that maybe weren't going right outside of that, like I just focused on the things that I could control, which was those two things, and found a way to get myself to go to college.
Thank you for sharing that. Sorry to say we had one more and then kept on asking more, but I thought I'd
That's what
Nah,
we
no,
do.
all good.
I thought I'd be doing an interview with you a disservice if I didn't ask those questions.
Nah, I appreciate it.
So, first final floor, sir. Are you a coffee drinker?
Oh my God, yeah. I've been drinking coffee since I was like three
It's
years old.
Colombian, bro.
How do you, how do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
I need it with cream. I like it a little bit light, and I brew my coffee. I'm not gonna lie, I'm Americanized now, so I make it in the Keurig.
All right. Are you using heavy cream? Are you using half and half? What are you using?
Just milk, just regular
Milk.
milk.
Right on.
Nick, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Nick Daza?
Yeah. Either Wim Hof, it's something different every day, but it's like a rotation. Wim Hof, I'm big on Tony Robbins meditations. I love Tony Robbins. When I was dealing with all the injuries was when I first found him, and it was just such a game changer for me energetically. And then I also have just kind of like my goal card in my phone. As soon as I open it every day, I read it and I just kind of remind myself like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and it helps me get centered and show up as the best version of myself.
Solid.
Yeah. Nick, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks. Are you reading anything?
Yeah. So since I went to Europe a couple weeks ago, I got to meet one of my mentors, Keegan Smith, who's a strength coach from Australia, and him and some of the guys recommended The Way the Superior Man. So I've been listening to that. I'm a big audiobook guy. I need to get into physical books more, but when I'm driving, I just like to put on an audiobook and just kind of soak it all in. And then there's two other books. So This Is Marketing and then Sell or Be Sold are the other two.
All right.
Is that first one was an audiobook you mentioned?
Yeah, The Way the
Yeah.
Superior Man.
Okay. Awesome. Nick, last one we have for you. Could be anything, could be food, could be maybe a specialty beverage. Do you have a guilty pleasure?
Oh yeah. Food wise, yeah, it's just like all the Colombian fried like pastries like empanadas, buñuelos, like there's just so many good fried foods out there that I definitely indulged in when I was over there the last couple weeks.
Okay. Jimmy and I there was a spot at the farmers market that we used to go to in Denver, and they had so there was one brick and mortar place that had Argentinian empanadas, but then
Yeah.
there was a food truck at the Denver farmers market that they were Colombian, so they had Colombian empanadas. So Jimmy and I kind of became connoisseurs of the different styles of empanadas from the different countries.
There you go. Which one did you like better?
I mean, I don't discriminate. I
Yeah.
love all empanadas. I like the pastry aspect to the Argentinian ones are really good. But I mean, the Colombian ones are delicious, and we got the ones with plantains in them too. And Jimmy and I are suckers for anything that has plantains in them. We're down for that. So they're
Oh
both
yeah.
delicious. Yeah.
I'll say if they were both at the same spot, like two stands next to each other, I'm going to the Columbia stand. That
There
said,
we
the
go.
Argentinian stand, when I used to go without Rich, and I used to get a dozen, and I used to sit there and eat a dozen on my own like a slob, and I wouldn't eat for a day after. I would like eat, and then I wouldn't eat till Monday.
They're
So
so good.
so good, deadly, deadly. Nick, thank you so much for your time. We really got a lot from this conversation. We know our listeners are going to get a lot from this conversation. Keep doing your thing, man. The wrestling community, young athletes need you. Keep doing your thing. You're doing great work, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yeah, Nick, thank you very much for joining us. We'll get all your stuff in the show notes. And anyone out there that is looking to connect with Nick to get more about some of his methodologies, his practices, his training, check out those links in the show notes. Give him a holler. Tell him the Airey Bros sent you, and get back to us. Let us know how the training's going. If you like anything we're doing over here, make sure you send us a like, give us a comment. Make sure you subscribe. We already know your mom's a fan. And don't forget to check us out over at Black Sheep Endurance too. Have a great night, y'all. We'll see you.